As the 1980s rolled around, many of those skaters who grew up in the 70s started to make their first steps into the world of competitive skateboarding, with many only in their early teens. It could be seen as a monumental achievement to achieve such success so young, and whilst the skills and abilities of the skaters showed such talent, skateboarding was still in its infancy and hadn't achieved mainstream success yet. With each skater opting for a different style such as street, vert, freestyle and others, sponsorship deals and competing in competitions were seen as being two major sources of income. But as the 90s came around, it also saw what limited success the sport had, and interest started to drop, with incomes drying up for even the best and most professional skaters. Things would become very tough, even for the most well-known ones. Three things, in my view, would see the sport take off in a way like never before and continue to gain more and more popularity. And the last of those things would be the release of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, the game that influenced the entire sport of skateboarding and showed the culture surrounding it to the masses. When the Extreme Sports competition came into being and later renamed to X Games, when this began in 1995, this would be the first step for the sport being back on people's radar, and the likes of Tony Hawk, having competed in it, went a long way in it gaining popularity. At the very same X Games in 1999, Tony Hawk would go on to perform the world's first 900 and prove to be one of the world's best skaters. Skateboarding as a whole was continuing to increase in popularity, as could be seen by the thousands of people watching him complete that 900 after several failed attempts. And that 900 was no easy feat. 2.5 times around, spinning whilst airborne when there are times you can't even see the ramp which you'll be landing on, and this brought attention to just that. The angle and momentum which was needed to spin and twist in order to make sure the board was in a position where you could land and complete the move. It was these things, the birth of the X Games, Tony Hawk's 900, which greatly contributed to the future of the sport, but it also proved something else. Tony Hawk was a scrawny kid during his school years and would get bullied often, a time he doesn't look back on fondly, or how Rodney Mullen was quite introverted and didn't like being around crowds, trying to perfect his skating technique, whilst his dad would constantly discourage him from doing it, and constantly reiterating to him that he would only be doing it for a short time before moving on to something else, not wanting him to get caught up in the supposed lazy slacker lifestyle of the skating scene. Tony Hawk was now perhaps the most famous face of the sport, which he loved, but there was one more notable occurrence that would happen that took skateboarding into the stratosphere and made names such as Tony Hawk, Bucky Lasek, and Rodney Mullen recognizable to millions and millions of more people around the world. Their lives and the fame which came at this time can be attributable to one last important thing. In 1999, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater had hit Sony's highly successful PS1, and skateboarding and everything that came along with it wasn't just more popular, with more of people's eyes on the sport. Through the release of the game, millions of people knew about the intricacies of it, the different styles, what a kickflip, heel flip, a nose grind, or an impossible were. Gamers sank hours and hours into perfecting these tricks and stringing together combos to get even higher scores. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater would go on to amass a huge fan base, and that only continued with its sequel, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, when it landed in the year 2000, improving on the first game in several areas and also having another fantastic soundtrack to go along with it. A classic series had been born, and skateboarding would continue its rise in popularity as more people took up the sport and purpose-built skate parks were being built around the globe. Now, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1&2 Remake would take everything that made the original game so memorable and loved and use modern hardware to deliver an experience never possible 2 decades earlier in terms of both visual fidelity and performance. But it would also take the feel of the originals and translate that to today. No easy feat. When some think of remasters or remakes, it should be known that sometimes it can actually be more difficult making one of these than creating something entirely new from scratch. The difficulty lies in getting the feel of the original game down, but then improving the whole package to make it worthy of existing. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1&2 Remake does this firstly with its graphics. Everything has been redone from the ground up, so everything you remember from the originals is still there, but the visual fidelity has been cranked up to 11 and it just doesn't look good as a remake. It looks fantastic when judged against other, new, graphically impressive titles. It starts with the character models themselves, no longer some crudely made 3D, low polygon models to try and recreate the look of the pro skaters they're meant to. Now, they are highly detailed captures to greatly resemble the skaters much better than could ever have been done before, right down to the detailed fingers, which just wasn't possible in the originals. The detail in the faces is what we expect from great looking games these days, and that detail extends to the character clothing, the creator skater feature, and of course, all of the skateboards and their different designs. The skaters themselves have never been animated better either, with each grab, trick and flip having a smooth flow from one to the other as you chain combos together or head up a ramp, pull off a grab trick, then spin and hit the perfect landing, then onto a manual as you continue the combo. The hard landings in the original games, which saw the character hit the ground with a small amount of blood spatter, have been removed, and instead we get this small distorted rewind feature, which isn't bad, but I did miss the original bails as you could really feel the impact of a trick that didn't get quite pulled off. Whether it's the pro skaters or those you create yourself, they all look fantastic, and when you couple the smooth animations together with it, it really is a huge step up from the originals. Then we get to the iconic levels themselves, where each needs to be packed full of detail that the hardware of today can bring, but also be faithful to the originals, so the levels themselves just become much better detailed recreations of what so many fans loved about these skate parks and areas. We can see the incredible changes made as soon as we hit the first skate park with the warehouse from the first game. Texture detail has been increased drastically, and we can see the difference that the ramps have to each other, plus the great looking graffiti, which further makes the stages not only seem even more authentic to the sport, but just a whole lot more interesting to skate around in. And if we stay with the warehouse as an example, busting through the glass at the start sees the wooden frame break off into many pieces and is a great introduction into the remake. Or even how you bust open the water valves in Downhill Jam, or how such iconic levels such as the mall and school have not only been recreated, they've become even more enjoyable to skate around in. Or grinding over the helicopter in the hangar and seeing it take off and bust through the roof as dust and debris fall down around us. 20 years ago we could only dream of having the stages looking like this and running this well. But the beauty doesn't stop there, as the levels now feel more based in reality. When you look out and see the backgrounds of city buildings or other objects in the distance, it feels like more of a real place. Seeing the faint glow of streetlights in New York, or the low-hanging sun on a quiet Venice beach. Even the indoor environments have been upgraded, whereby we feel like we are in an actual building, in an actual location, with sunlight streaming in through the windows and casting shadows onto the ground. And then we get to the sound. This area is very much faithful to those original games, with every trick and object your board comes into contact with sounding as it should. But to be honest, there isn't really all that much in terms of sound effects apart from this and grinding on top of rails, buildings or ramps. You'll also have the sounds of horns on certain levels, such as in New York, where vehicles are driving around and which you'll need to avoid. But the real star of the sound is of course the soundtracks that accompany these games. If you grew up playing these or listening to the music at the time, then you'll have a flood of memories coming back. From the punk, rock and rap songs that all fit so well with what's happening on screen, and I particularly like listening to the punk tracks for that extra level of authenticity and how it fits in with the culture of skateboarding. And the highlight for myself would be No Cigar by Millencolin, a great upbeat track to skate around to, and something I was already listening to at the time the originals came out. But depending on which tracks you enjoy or don't, they can be turned on and off in the options menu, or can be skipped during gameplay as well. So moving on to that gameplay, it's been brought across all intact from the originals, but it all just feels more precise in terms of controlling the skaters due to the excellent performance of the game as a whole. For those who poured in dozens, if not hundreds of hours into Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 already, then you'll feel right at home only after a short playtime with the remakes, as your muscle memory will no doubt kick in fairly quickly and you'll be chaining together combos almost effortlessly. But for those who haven't played the games for almost 20 years such as myself, then there will be a learning curve which you'll need to overcome as you slowly get into the rhythm of how each trick works, the maneuverability of the skater, and how far you can push a trick or grind, but also be able to land it properly and keep your balance. For me, it took some time and practice before getting things right, even though I wouldn't go so far as say I was highly skilled at all with the game. But for those who might be struggling a little too much, or simply don't want to have to hit every landing or balancing on everything perfectly, then the game has options to turn mods on and off in the pause menu. Are you bailing with each spin or trick you're trying to perform, or are you after a more relaxed play session? Then you can have the option to never fall off your board, no matter what you do. Of course, this strips a lot of the challenge from the game, but if you're finding it tough to get some of those high scores, then this will help out a lot. The same goes for if you can't quite balance properly. Turn on the mod and you'll be chaining many tricks together without fear of failing or falling. Whether using these mods or not, as you progress through the challenges, you'll also earn skill points which can be spent in upgrading your skater. So they do have better balance or can jump higher, for example, and these can also help with the various challenges as well. Plus, you'll also be able to customize the look of your skater through different cosmetic options, or try and create your own skate park in the editor even. The Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 Remake is of exceptional quality for a remake, but there are a couple of negatives which may hold it back for you if you're undecided on whether it's a purchase. Firstly, although it looks and performs fantastically, these are the games as you remember them, just with a very shiny coat of paint, so if you weren't the biggest fan of them back then chances are they won't blow you away now. And secondly, you may enjoy them a lot, but may find you finish them quite quickly, and then have no real itch to keep returning. Stages can be completed in a matter of minutes, especially for those who remember where all the collectibles, such as the secret tapes, are. But for new players, the Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2 Remake is of the highest quality and will give you many hours of enjoyment if you're after a skateboarding game and want to check out this classic series. Once you get the controls down, experience the gameplay and crank up the music, you may fall in love with the series like so many others have and wonder when the same treatment will be given to the rest of the series.